Welcome, everybody. Welcome to People's Postcode Lottery and to Lean Agile Edinburgh. We are looking forward to the talks this evening. A couple of announcements just to make is the way that you came in is the way that you would go out if there's a fire alarm. We're not expecting any alarms this evening, so if you do hear one, it's not a drill. And the bathrooms are just on the right-hand side as you come out of the kitchen area there, next to the lifts. So I think that's pretty much all that I need to say. I hope you've enjoyed the pizza and the beer so far, and I hope you enjoy the talks, and I'll hand over to Suzanne just now.
Thank you, and a big thanks to People's Postcode Lottery for hosting us this evening and providing all the refreshments. My name's Suzanne Morrison, and I just want to welcome everyone to Lean Agile Edinburgh tonight. Have we got any first-timers in the room? Just stick your hand up. So we've got a few people here, so yeah, a big welcome to you. If you've not heard of us before, we go quite a few years, and I'm trying to remember which year, Stephen, you'll know when we started. 2013 it started with some like-minded Agilists in the pub with some post-it notes, and then over the years it's grown now to, I think we're over 2,000 people on Meetup, which is great. And throughout the pandemic we've been running sessions mostly online, which has been really interesting because we've had people from all over the world join us, but it's really nice to get back to these in-person meetups and kind of, I think you get more energy in the room, and it's nice to speak to people face to face as well. So we've got some really interesting talks ahead tonight. So we've got two talks. We've got Stuart Pavitt, and we've also got Jeff Johnson. So we're going to do the first talk and then have a little bit of a break for a refreshment and a chat, and then we'll do the second talk after that. There's 5 of us that organise Lean Agile Edinburgh. So tonight we've got Duncan, and we've also got Stephen. So if there's any questions or anything you want to ask, feel free to come and chat to any of us. We've got a little sort of community board here, so if you're interested in doing a talk in the future at Lean Agile Edinburgh, we'd love for you to submit your idea, so we've got the URL there for you to submit that. Also, if you're seeking a job or you're hiring or you've got any community events coming up or any training, feel free to just grab a post-it note and write it down and put it on that board as well. I've got my checklist here because I'm so used to doing online meetups these days. So one final thing to mention is we've got a code of conduct. It's available on our meetup site if you want to look at it. But it's basically be kind to each other, be nice to each other. If you've got any problems at all, feel free to come and speak to one of the organisers. And I think that's it. So I'll introduce our first speaker of this evening, which is Stuart Pavitt. And you've already got a mic, so yeah.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Stuart Pavitt, and I'm going to talk about cargo cults. And basically, if you're not interested, we're going to talk about what they are, why they are a problem in Agile, and what to do about them. If that doesn't interest you, we can change the subject, I suppose. So I thought it would be better with this talk because the first bit is about cargo cults, and then Agile, if that becomes more interactive, if anyone wants to sort of ask questions halfway through, feel free. There's some, provocative ideas in here, maybe not. See what everyone thinks. So we'll just dive in. There's only 5 slides, so I'm not going to change them a lot. So what are cargo cults? So they actually predate the South Pacific cargo cults that everyone, if you've heard of cargo cults, you've probably heard of them, and there's a whole better description of them than how I'm going to describe them, and they're actually really interesting. So if you're interested, like Wikipedia cargo cults, there you go. They're nothing to do with, they are to do with cargo and cults. So basically what happened with the South Pacific ones is during the war, the Japanese started dropping supplies. The Americans started dropping supplies into these Pacific Islanders. Pacific Islanders thought that was really cool. They were getting cargo, they were getting loads of cool stuff. And then at the end of the war, everyone left, and they didn't understand why. So lots of people suggested that if they acted like an airport, and they pretended to be an airport, and they built planes, and they built air traffic controller towers, and they built the air traffic controller stuff, the planes would come back. The idea was, I know it sounds mental, the idea was that planes would fly over, see this, and say, hey, there's an airport, let's land it, and then give them the stuff. Right? And it's really easy to think, and we keep doing this in humanity. We always think people were really stupid in the past. Like you think, people in the 1800s would die in their 30s. Idiots. Like that just is what we do. And like people in the 1800s thought people in the 1400s were idiots. Because, Black Death and all that. And we keep doing that, and just imagine what your grandchildren, how thick your grandchildren will think you are. But it's pretty much the same thing that keeps happening. And hopefully what I'll do is, if you really do think these people are really thick, or like, well, how could they not understand? Wait until we start talking about some of the crazy stuff we do day to day, and then we might think, okay. So this John Foom guy was really quite interesting. There's a whole American thing where these guys would like deifying some of the American guys that were there because they were the sort of like Tom Navy and John Foom. It's really like the Wikipedia page, honestly. If you want to know what a cargo cult is better than I can say it, Wikipedia cargo cults. The definition that I quite like, and I'll steal this because why think of something original when somebody can write it for me? It's when we imitate behaviours without understanding how they work in the hope of achieving the same results. Naturally enough, this isn't something that always works. Sometimes it works. But like, I don't know if like that is actually, if you think about that, we do that quite a lot. Businesses are full of cargo cults. Like, we just do these things thinking they're going to work, like we just deal with like mean people by being nice to them because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, the Pacific, if you're really interested, just the Pacific cults are really interested, and there's loads of pictures of this stuff, and it's really fascinating. Cool. So why are they relevant to us? Alan Haloub, I've stolen a lot of this from Alan Haloub. He does an even better talk on Agile is Dead, where he talks a lot about cargo cults and what like the hatred he has for Agile, or what Agile is now, or the way it's implemented in Scrum. But basically, yeah, businesses are just massive cargo cults. They just do loads of stuff, and like there's loads of examples of this where businesses just do it, and to be honest, software developers do it as well. I hate to say it. So cold calling, pipeline management, away days, stock options, Scotsman, L10s. We just do these things because we want to prove we're big enough or smart enough. I worked for quite a big Scottish government last year, and the amount of stuff we did, which was completely pointless. Like, we did estimating before we knew anything. And then we were just plugging numbers into some crazy Excel spreadsheets, pressing the button, and getting some absolute ridiculous numbers. And the client were like, hey, that's amazing. And you're like, that's just rubbish. And they're like, yeah, we know, but we just, we need to do it because everyone, like our bosses are expecting to, right? It just happens. And yeah, so I think there's a lot to it. I think there's a lot to really examining what we are doing and how we're doing it. And are we following process for process sake, or are we possibly falling over? Now, one of the things Agile says, which is the big thing whenever anyone asks me to do anything, in any Agile framework or anything Agile, they say, you have to follow this process. I'm like, but people and interactions come before process and tools. If anyone disagrees with this, this is the bit you shout out, right? Honestly, if you disagree, just shout, swear at me, it's fine. But fundamentally, people and interactions should come before processes, which suggests to me that, like, nobody should be doing Scrum the same way, which is really weird, because I kind of think Scrum's just a massive cargo cult. So if you like Scrum, I like the idea of it, I just don't think it ever works. But yeah, so I did Scrum for years, joined loads of organizations, was completely marauding dev for years, joined this place, never did it the same way twice, thought, I'm not doing Scrum right, I've got to find the perfect way of doing Scrum. And then it hit me when somebody said, go read the Agile Manifesto, and I got to, like, what's that, the second principle, first principle, third? People and interactions, third. Got there and I went, that's fine, don't ever have to worry about doing anything again. That's my get out of jail free card, because basically it's just like I'm a person that doesn't want to follow that process. That's not always true. I do have to follow some processes where the collective force me, because I'm not completely horrible to people. I will follow, like, the thing, but they just have to justify it. I think that's the big thing. So, yeah, so do I think there's a problem in Agile? Yes. Is there a problem with the concepts of Agile? I don't think so. Is there a problem with the concepts of Scrum? No, I quite like Scrum. I can argue it's not Agile, it might be iterative, and we can talk about that. But is there a fundamental problem with, like, the Scrum framework? Not sure, but there's loads of problems that we're seeing. So what are they? I love the idea that I can become a master of anything in 2 days. Like, I just think that is fundamentally the best thing in the world. I have mastered nothing in 2 days. If anyone has mastered something in 2 days, let me know what it is. I am totally up for playing. Juggling, 30 years, can't juggle, not a master of that. Software development, 20 years, still pretty shit. Yeah, so the idea that you can become a Scrum Master. Now, I was on LinkedIn. If anyone follows some famous people on LinkedIn, you might have seen me having an argument with somebody, might not. And they were like, but it's a title. It's not actually a mastery, it's a title. Well, if you call yourself a master, you better be a master. DJ, master of ceremonies, maybe MC Hammer, but no. So yeah, Scrum Master certificates. I'm not the first person. Bob Martin said it. You know, he's two good things about him. He has that in his books, and the rest we can talk about, not talk about. But yeah, certified in 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours. I was talking to a Scrum Master today who is actually really good at his job. He is a really, really good Scrum Master, but it took him more than 2 days. And he said that there's an 8-year-old that is a certified Scrum Master. And in fact, you cannot fail the certified Scrum Master course. If you just keep plugging answers, eventually you will get through it, which is awesome because there's hope for me. Estimating software is the biggest cargo cult out there. If you are estimating software, I will completely stand, and this is the hill I will die on. Estimating software is a complete waste of time, resource, energy. All it does is make everyone upset and angry. And if it doesn't make you upset and angry, you're not doing it right. Because it's a horrible waste of existence. Because as soon as you start thinking about it, if you waste any of your life doing estimating software, it does not change how long it takes to build the software. It makes no difference. If a bit of software takes 7 days to write, and you estimate it at 7 days, it still takes 7 days. If you estimate it 1 day, it still takes 7 days. Estimate it 2 weeks, it still takes 7 days. It's just pointless time wasted getting into fights. Maybe I'm sort of highlighting some of the stuff I do. Hey.
Yeah, sorry, just a point, right? So I get what you're saying.
Cool.
I think it's a really good point to make.
That good?
Yeah, no, it is. It doesn't change the length of time that it takes to make software. However, yeah, sorry.
Just saying that the estimation, if you're using it just to estimate how long something's going to take, I think you're missing part of the point. The idea behind the estimation is not just how long it's going to take, it's also to prioritize by value into your backlog.
Oh, but that's not estimating software. That's prioritizing and adding stuff to your backlog. Those two things are different. Like, I can estimate how long it takes me to walk to the door. It has nothing to do with the value I achieve doing that. I can estimate how long it takes me to walk to London. I have nothing about the value that gets me to, like, what is the value of me doing it? Two different things.
So it's literally just software?
No, it's estimating anything. Like, estimating something based on, like, good facts is a good idea, but building software is fundamentally, like, you're constantly working on a changing environment. You cannot estimate software. And if you do, you're never right. So why bother? Like, don't get me wrong, if you want to forecast, we can talk about amazing ways to forecast that will just save your time and effort and be so much better. But estimating software, like story points, even the guy that wrote them thinks they're rubbish. Like, so yeah.
We have a debate here.
What about capacity planning?
Sorry?
What about capacity planning?
I don't really do capacity, but I do forecasting because it's really easy because I can count up to 5. I have one hand and I do forecasting with that. What I do is if I want to know how many stories, like say if a feature's got 100 stories and I want to know when I'm going to be done, I just count the stories my team have done this week and then say, hey, they do 10 stories. We're going to be done in 10 weeks. That's how quick it is. I don't drag everyone into endless meetings where they hate each other and they get really upset about a 5 or a 3 or a 2 or, I don't know, 13, 21. Just, a story's a story, just do it.
May I paraphrase? I think you don't do capacity planning, maybe?
I don't know, I don't think I do. I mean, I forecast, but that's it.
It sounds like you're basically just reversing the estimation process. You're just breaking the stories down into a size that you estimate.
No, I don't break the stories down. We just create the stories, right? And we just take an average across the board. So we have some big stories, we have some little stories, we have some mega huge stories. We just do, the team did 7 stories last week. We think the team will do 7. And amazingly, it actually works. Like Wally, I can't remember the guy's name. I want to say it's, but if you look up no estimates, there's much clever, much more enthusiastic, much people that you should respect much more than me are saying, hey, within 3 sprints, you will have an accurate forecast. Like, estimating software is fundamentally just achieves nothing except upset people. It is just, we do it because people think we should, which is a cargo cult.
I have a different question to move a bit away from this. Like, I agree with your point on estimations, but how do we convince people that believe that these estimations are important from a business point of view that not to do them? How do we fix this?
I see, that's why it's not the topic of my conference, because that's really hard, right? Convincing businesses to not ask you to do stupid stuff. Like, I've been doing it for 20 years, and my result is just screw you guys, I'll go get another job. Like, that is fun. Like, yeah. There's lots of businesses that have got to that point with me, and I was like, hey, that's an interesting question. I'm not wasting my time here, I'll go work over here. But it's really, I mean, we'll get on to Scrum, because I know some people really love Scrum, and some people really hate Scrum. I'm in that category, I'll be quite honest. It's not Agile in my point of view, but we can talk about that. But yeah, it's really difficult, because actually, what I saw working for the Scottish Government was just the amount of time it wasted basically just doing stuff because people thought they needed the answer. And it didn't matter what the answer was. So eventually I just stopped actually doing what they wanted me to do, and I just came up with random numbers and I gave them a random number. And nobody ever queried me. Nobody ever queried me unless I got a really low or a really high number. So I just worked out roughly what they wanted, and it was that one.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying. If something takes 7 days and you estimate 3, it'll still take 7 days. If you estimate 7, it'll still take 7 days. If you estimate 14. Now, I've had 40 years in industry, and if you estimate 14, it'll take 14. Whether it takes 7 or not, it'll take 14.
Yeah, I mean, work will stretch, right? I mean, it's true, right? If anyone, like the definition of that, if you want to prove that, ask anyone how long it took them to give out their dissertation, and if they're not a horrible person, or if they're actually worthwhile having a pint with, they will say the night before they were still revising, because it's stretched. Work just stretches, yeah. Like that's why forecasting kind of works. But you also don't get sprint burnout, which is a thing. So, hey.
It's just a last comment.
No, you can make as many as you want. It's fine, I don't care.
So if
There's literally 3 slides left. There's not that much content. I did that.
If you look at the last review about Scrum, so they just teach out the estimation part. There's scientific proof that humans are not good at estimating to work. So that's
humans aren't good at estimating anything, by the way.
That's a good proof.
Anything.
You can do to your business, say, even Scrum don't use it anymore, you know?
I mean, it's not part of Scrum.
Yeah.
No. Stephen can confirm this, but I don't think estimating is mentioned in Scrum at all.
No.
The original Scrum guide? I don't think so. No. Just says committing, which is another weird cargo culty thing.
So basically what we do with our team, we estimate difficulty, how difficult it is to do something. That's what we do.
Yeah, we did that as well. We went through that process of let's just work out how difficult it is. But the thing is, what you're doing is collectively, well, I would say it's not a good idea, but if it works for you, crack on, because people and interactions over processes, so ignore everything I say because it's Agile. But fundamentally, if it works for you guys, cool, because waterfall works for some people, right? Like, waterfall is the only way we know of getting a man to the moon, right? If you Agile going to the moon, it's not going to work. I don't care. If you try an Agile, a game before the internet, it wasn't going to work. You had to waterfall the damn thing. And yeah, we've done loads of cool things, but people will find interesting ways of making stuff work. So if it works for you, crack on. Like, if you actually think you get value from it and you can prove it, what I would say is, one of the things I'll say at the end is when we talk about how to really evaluate cargo cults, we'll come on to it, but like, stop doing it and see if you speed up or slow down or make no change. Because if whatever happens, you've got an answer. Joy.
So I may or may not agree with you. But
that's amazing that you and me don't agree with this.
I may or may not.
How's your safe certifications going?
So the question is not necessarily about whether or not we should estimate or whether or not it's accurate, because as you mentioned, when a team is mature enough, they naturally come up with better estimations without really trying.
No,
or they
I'm 20 years
size
and I
the
still
slices.
can't estimate crap.
But they naturally size the slices they're going to work on, which means you understand the flow. But the question I'm going to ask you is, what is the reason? So basically, what do you believe the reason for people believing in the estimation? Why do people try
Because
and
it's a
estimate?
cargo cult. Because we need to be big enough, strong enough, clever enough. We need to be, like when you go in, you say, I'm an Agile software developer. People expect you to estimate your software. People don't expect you to turn around and say, your processes suck. I'm a person. I'm not going to follow any of your crap. What we're going to do is rewrite processes to remove artificial impediments. People don't expect that. But when you do that and you shake everything up, you actually generally sometimes get a better process. Sometimes you get a really shit process. Got to be honest, and then you have to try again. But that's Agile. That's the whole thing about like trying it. You don't just blindly do anything. Like stop doing it. Like literally anything you don't want to do, stop doing it and see who shouts at you. And if it's managers shouting at you because reporting, Agile does not fix that. You know, changing your email address fixes that. Changing your job fixes that. But if your team doesn't slow down, you're getting no benefit from it.
Which suggests to me that the way I'm hearing you, basically you're saying that you will increase your velocity. You will basically naturally have a team that functions well, which will find its own rate, but not necessarily be able to report on future forecasts and deliverables.
I think you
to
can.
upper
I
management.
think if you drop estimating, you will actually get consistency, which is more important than velocity. Like velocity is just speed in a direction, right? That's what velocity actually means by the physics term. It's the only thing I remember from school. Thanks, Mr. Sadler. It's the only thing I can possibly remember from school. But actually in software, like I was totally obsessed with velocity for the first 3-4 years of Agile. And then it just got really tiring and crap. And I went, you know what, consistency. Because then if I just don't burn out my team, if I don't burn out, I just do so much better. Yeah.
And I'm going to finish because this is my final comment.
Until the next slide.
No, because I'm sure somebody's going to take it. But I'm just going to say, I'm sure everybody knows this. Consistency beats intensity. So
Yeah.
anybody else?
Yep. I mean, strangely enough, I had a discussion with my team recently, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to move to Scrum." And I was like, "Brilliant! Why are you moving to Scrum?" We think we should. I was like, "Why?" They couldn't answer. And then, well, we think we'll increase velocity. I'm like, I'm the CTO. I don't care about you increasing velocity. And then it was just like, what do you mean? It's like you're working at a rate I'm happy with. Why? Like, if you want to move to Scrum, find a better reason than increasing velocity because your boss doesn't care. And then, yeah, that kind of, they're still discussing it randomly in retros. I don't do retros, so like, I'm sure they're discussing other things and how horrible I am. But that's their issues. So another couple of things, let's move on. I'll leave my favorite to last. Certification of Scrum found, you know, the Scrum factories, like the certified factories. I mean, don't get me wrong, Scrum, like to be a good Scrum Master, you need to understand how to be a Scrum Master. It's really important. There's some really good people teaching people the fundamentals of Scrum and really spending time. Stephen for one, Calber for another, or the same thing. They're actually teaching people Scrum, right? I get that. But the Scrum factories where you can just go and turn up and then just do click, 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 and eventually you're Scrum Master. And there's people that are Scrum Masters that I've got absolutely no understanding of it because all they did was a 4-hour course. And then they just wreak havoc. And the final, let's just celebrate the joy, which is Jiva. Jiva exists so that evil has a name. They are the Brussels sprouts of software project management. Atlassian, you can sue my ass off anytime you want. Your product sucks. Every time I've ever seen Jiva introduced, we have crashed and burned and slowed down. Like, how much money have we seen wasted trying to get Jiva reports to work? Like, literally, reporting Jiva is just like, what are we doing? Like, building workflows in Jiva, it's the most configurable piece of crap in the universe. It is just a cargo cult. And I'm sure Atlassian, the company that give like $10 to charity every license, yeah, they're the Elon Musk of software project management. They're horrible. Just whatever. Pen and paper. Like, literally, chicken bones. You'll get a better result than Jiva. I hate Jiva. Like, sorry. I don't think Atlassian's giving me a job anytime soon. What do we use? We use Azure DevOps. It's just as bad, but what else? There's nothing out there. Like, it's like peer review. There's no good software out there that I have discovered which isn't just fundamentally crap. It's like, sorry? So Trello is, as a Scrum board, is brilliant. Trello is fundamentally like the best of everything out there. It just works. Except I still think I have a postcode lottery access to Trello because I set it up 10 years ago and I still think I've got access to one of the boards. So they haven't quite got the identity thing right. But yeah, Trello is the best. Let's celebrate Trello. Everything else is horrible. Yeah, we use Azure DevOps because we need something because we're a remote team. But we really minimize how much we do on it because everything else just... The other thing that totally sucks, if anyone's ever wondered about the other thing that completely sucks in software development, is like PRs. If you can think of a worse, like if you can actually just think of you pour your emotional intelligence into something, then you send it off into the ether, and then somebody randomly slags you off. And that's the best we've got. And then they write like smiley faces. And you're like, and then they ask you why you haven't done something the 7th way. It's like, well, if you keep reading the code, you'll find out why I didn't do it that way, smart ass. Because it's a really bad idea. Yeah, PRs. Nobody's figured that one out. That is $1 million idea if you can work out how to do PRs without like actually anger each other. I didn't even get onto backlogs. Backlogs. I like backlogs. I like the idea of backlogs. But if your backlog's got more than like 10 things on it based on the number of team members, it's a cargo cult. You're just wasting time maintaining a backlog that's never going to get worked on. Just do it right. Just do it as close to the time. We're the smartest people in the universe. As you start a task, you cannot be smarter than the second you start the task. So delay everything. Make it future Stuart's problem. He's an arsehole, trust me. Make him do all your hard work. Delay everything until the last possible second. With backlogs, like if you have a backlog item for we need a login page, cool, but delay, because then you're going to get a result, because then you're just going to do the work once, give it to a dev and they're going to do it, or you're going to do it together, like collaborate, that whole Agile thing. So yeah, this is the bit I'll get onto and you can all shout at me and scream at me and disagree with me. Is Scrum Agile? I don't think it is. I really, really, really want it to be, but it just as a waterfall project shrunk, which suggests to me that a waterfall project is really, really agile if I just accept a really long sprint window. The other thing I find really weird about Scrum, like, has everyone used Scrum? Cool. So roughly, if you count, how many people have abandoned the sprint? 1, 2. Like, but that's a fundamental bit of the process. 3, how have you not abandoned a sprint? What are you doing wrong? Like, why aren't you abandoning your sprints? It's a fundamental, when you can't hit your sprint goal, you abandon your sprint. When your priorities change, you can't abandon your sprint. Agile's... Yeah, that's what you're meant to do with the sprints. You're meant to abandon the damn things when they're failing. But like, so I talked to a few people I know in software, like, and again, guys my age that are well sort of just jaded with this whole thing. And we talked about all the sprints we had done, and I've done, what, 40 sprints a year for, no, couldn't done, because it's always 2 weeks. So 20 sprints a year for what, 10 years. So 200 sprints. I have had 2 abandoned sprints. And that was pretty much universal across, right? Now, it's not always my decision, so you can't just say, Stuart, you're not abandoning your sprints. It was just collectively, everyone is terrified of abandoning a sprint, but it's really purposeful, right? So if you don't abandon a sprint, then there's a fundamental bit of the process you're not following, right? Which might be the reverse of a cargo cult, where you just refuse to follow the process because it's a bad idea. I don't know. The other thing, has anyone ever, like, I presume if I asked you all collectively what your sprint iteration window is, your cycle, it's 2 weeks, right? Everybody does 2 weeks.
I asked, why is it 2 weeks?
Well, let's find out, because somebody's bound to know. See, 1 week, that's brilliant. It's against the Agile Manifesto, but it's 1 week, because it says 2 weeks. But yeah.
I think this is what works for your team.
Exactly, right? But the thing is, everyone else is doing 2 week sprints. So if we are people and interactions over processes, why is everyone doing 2 week sprints? That doesn't make sense. Like,
yeah, I'll throw this out because a 2 week sprint allows you to do 6 sprints and then a 1 week PI planning. It's a bit of a bit of financial water. It's tied to the waterfall flow of
So that is the answer. That's why.
it is. It's because business want you to leastly cycle. That is why we do 2 week sprints. It's nothing to do with Agile software development.
No, but that's a big fundamental for what you're talking about here, because a lot of the stuff that you're mentioning, I don't fundamentally disagree with what you're saying, but some of us work in organizations where you can say things like, we're going to go no estimates, we're going to abandon all of this stuff, and others of us...
So you work in non-Agile organizations? I mean, that's what you have to say.
In large multinational
Yeah.
enterprises.
So you work in non-agile organizations. You're not, like, I hate to say you're not agile if you cannot dictate your agile, your iteration window.
I think by your benchmark, yeah.
By any benchmark. By any benchmark. Like, if you read the Agile Manifesto, if you read the principles, if you read the themes, it is up to the team how they deliver. I've got an amazing bit when we get onto Agile delivery managers, which is amazing people. I have nothing against you, but your role should not exist. The tasks should exist. They should not be owned by somebody called an Agile delivery manager. But we'll get onto that. But yeah, if you cannot change this stuff, you're not Agile, because Agile was all about empowering the developers, putting everyone together, empowering them to make the best product they can for the customer. And yes, Scrum is the acceptable Agile face of corporate life. It is. But that doesn't make it Agile. That makes it what it is. Right? So I think it's iterative. I will totally accept you can iterate with Agile. But I think the amount of issues that you have with Scrum, not actually the way the framework, Jeff Sutherland, pretty clever guy, can't disagree with what he said. It just completely fell over when the people got involved. It's like a crypto startup. It's an amazing idea until people get involved, and then it's just a shit show. Because everyone does it really weirdly.
It reminded me of the look I got when I floated the idea of 3-week sprints, because you actually get done increments in that time, and then work on streamline, and then they go back to 2 weeks.
I always vote for 1 day or 6 months. That's why they don't let me vote anymore. But it's always 1 day or 6 months. That's the two acceptable sprint windows to me. But yeah, one of them's definitely agile, one of them's chaotic, and one of them's waterfall. But is it? Yeah. So what else we got? Planning the task. Yeah. So the other cargo cult, and if you've never had this, I just wish I was you. Has anyone spent more time talking about a task than the time it takes to complete it? Fuck yeah. Like, I remember having a task which was fun, changing one line of text. We spent 2 hours talking about it. It's like, what are we doing, everybody? That's like, there was 6 of us in a room. That was like a day and a half of effort, right? Or man, person, whatever. And you're like, it's literally, just change the damn thing. We don't need to talk. We don't need acceptance criteria. Just do. Yeah. So, and again, this isn't actually anything wrong with Scrum. It's just the way we implement this damn thing when we get really stressed about it and like we allow people to dictate it. Yeah, I should come back to the delivery manager statement. So delivery managers, I didn't actually set this up for the web. So the delivery manager job title, if you read the Gov UK one, which I should have, but I didn't, sorry, it basically lists a whole pile of stuff that were really important in Agile projects, right? So it's all about training the team. It's all about tracking like progress, and it's all about coaching and all that, right? But actually, it's either a Scrum Master role, which they don't want to call it, or it's actually the responsibility of the team to do that. And it's like this other cargo cult which has appeared in Scrum, which is the devs are too busy to do anything except code. So we'll take all the control away from them, and we'll give them to other people, and then we'll get all the Agile benefits, but we won't treat them like an Agile team. And you're like, then they're not an Agile team. They're just, you're in a command and control organization and you're just beating your devs over the head because they're not delivering to the delivery manager schedule, which makes no sense because they're just like guessing estimates out of Excel, you know. So yeah, the last couple, the last one I will talk about before we move on. Retros. Does everybody like a good retro?
Yes.
Yes, I love a good retro. Is it the end game? What is the end game? Constant improvement. But who has ever managed it? Apart from Alan Haloub. Have you managed it and have you managed it? Like just not having retros?
Yeah, so...
You have not worked with enough Scottish people. There is not enough Scottish people. Like,
maybe that's it. But what we take from a retro is that we have a continual Kaizen that we work on every single sprint. And it needs to just be one small thing, but that's what the purpose of retro is.
so you still have your retro?
Yeah, we have our retro.
The
output
so,
of the retro is our Kaizen improvement, which we take forward.
Yeah,
into
but you
the
still
next
have
sprint.
a meeting and you do your retro every 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is not the end goal of a retro.
No.
Agile says that's not the end. Well, whether it's Agile or Alan Haloub, I like Alan Haloub's answer to this, which is proper Agile teams will identify a problem, fix it at the time, and move on. They will just come together, form a cohort round the water cooler, say, hey, that doesn't work, let's fix it, move on.
I think he's more generous than the engineers I've worked with.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there's nothing better than if you want to waste a couple hours of corporate time, just watch old guys moaning about Agile. It's cathartic. I mean, honestly, just put it on YouTube, headphones in, I'm on a Teams call, just blast away Alan Halloub, John Jeffries moaning about story points. Afternoon well spent. But yeah, they just go wrong. I think the amount of time I've been in retros, and I actually really fundamentally believe in a retro. I think it's got to be an honesty session, but we also deal with, 25% of developers, if we're really nice, or neurodiverse. They don't want to talk about the issues. They don't want to even be there. And yet it's like, hey, you've got to force yourself into a retro. So again, I was chatting to one of the Scrum Masters I know, and I was like, hey, have you ever allowed somebody to drop out of retro? He's like, no, everyone's got to do a retro. Everyone's got to do a retro. It's like, what if they don't want to do a retro? Everyone's got to do a retro. It's where your team improve. It's like, but you're enforcing process on a person. If a person doesn't want to do a retro, they don't have to do a retro. People in interactions. Oh no, they've got to do retros. And then they come along and they don't want to be there. So there's quite science. So you're getting no benefit out of some people. I'm not against retros. Like, retros are really useful, but they're not the end goal. The end goal has to be to move to continual improvement, which is not having a meeting at all, which is, there's a problem, identify it, fix it, move on. Next. Just continual agile, continual pivot. Has to be the answer. Anyone, anything about that before we move on?
It wasn't about that, but Jeff from earlier asked, isn't Trello now owned by Atlassian?
Is Trello
not owned by Atlassian?
It could be. I mean, that's exactly what evil companies do, right? They just swallow up the good ones. Sorry, Atlassian, you can find my name. Come on, come and get me. I mean, Atlassian, I'm pretty sure Atlassian give like $10 a month every user sign up to charity. It's still evil. It's still an awful tool. Cool. So what to do about them? I'm coming to the end. This is my last slide, so feel free. Reduce waste. Examine your processes. Like, one of the best things I always like to do with teams, especially new teams or old teams or any teams I come across, is I just ask people what happens if they stop doing shit. Like, just stop doing it and see who complains. And if management complains, just give them a false number. Like, literally. And I am management, so I can say that. But yeah, just stop doing it and see if you speed up or slow down. Like, it's the best way to agile your way out of cargo cults is this valuable? Do we really believe it's valuable? Like, especially if people are getting angsty, because quite a lot of time developers get angsty when you get them to do stuff which isn't like sitting alone in dark coding. But yeah, ask yourself what happens if you stop doing them. Does it speed up? Does it slow down? Does it not change? If you actually stop doing something and nothing changes, the thing you were doing has no value. If things slow down, it had value. If things speed up, you were an impediment. Well done, you created an impediment. The amount of impediments we create to actually slowing down software. PRs are one, stage gates, staging environment, dev environment, QA, testing, you know, everything just slows us down. Everything is an impediment. Risk management, let's create release notes, impediment. Yeah, release notes that I'd never read, impediment. Get commit messages that have a format, impediment. All this stuff just continues.
I'm not going to ask a question per se, but what you're saying here, the way I read this, is it's lean analysis. So basically it's the implementation of lean agile.
Oh yeah, that's yeah. Just continually look to reduce waste, like anywhere it exists. And that might well be, you know, I mean, there's a reason that like adding software developers to a late project does not speed up the project, right? There's a reason for that. It's because they create impediments and they slow stuff down. So yeah, that's it. That's the end of my talk. That is what I think about cargo cults, and that is why I think we should always constantly try to just fight against them as much as possible, identify them, destroy them, wait until they crop up again. Because all this stuff started with like trying to do things. Like where technical debt is also the delivery of features, cargo cults are trying to show off or trying to prove something. And sometimes they start really well and then we just do them too often and we don't get the value. So that was it.
Just a couple of points from the live stream. He said to counter that, Atlassian did an Accenture-style acquisition and absorbed it into the product range. And one point to make, someone I know came up with a fifth agile value, anti-pattern cargo cult, but with regards to training, experience over certification.
So I can't hear you because I'm...
Oh, sorry. All right.
But
so,
I like the idea about a fifth principle. I mean, we can get onto why the Agile Manifesto's out of date, and it well needs those guys to come up with V2. But
I'll just make that point again, sorry. So 1 point to make, someone I know come up with a fifth Agile value, anti-pattern cargo cult, but with regards to training, experience over certification.
that's not me, by the way. I didn't write that. So somebody else out there thinks similar. Well done, that person. Thanks, Mum. Anyone else? That us? Oh.
I'm just interested. The way you've framed things is about tearing down specified processes rather than starting with the simplest thing that could possibly work and sort of identifying things that do work and trying them and seeing if that helps. Is that not a better approach rather than trying to tear down an existing process?
Yeah, so absolutely. But how often do we get to do that? Like every
I mean, that seems to be what my team's doing, but I'm very lucky, I guess. So we are identifying things that we think will help us and trying them.
Oh yeah, so that's Agile. So you're iterating. Yeah, so you're looking at a bunch of experiments, but that is what Scrum says. You do a 2 week window and then you iterate and you experiment and you see what works. If it works, you keep doing it. If you don't do it, but there's fundamental underlying things that we do not attack. Like nobody has ever, no dev apart from like one or two, has ever came up in the middle of a retrospective and went, I want to stop doing retrospectives, so we decide to do it. Nobody said that. Why? Like nobody's ever said, hey, I want to change a 2 week window to a 17 week window. Why? Like, but that's it. But again, all these processes existed once for a very good reason. It's just we stopped understanding the reason. We grew, we extended, we changed, we morphed, we grew. And these processes just exist. And we follow them blindly because we want to be clever, we want to be smart, we want to go and say, I can estimate like to 90% accuracy. No, I estimate to 100% accuracy, but not doing it. So.
I've been really enjoying what you're saying because I work with hardware. Right? I don't work with software at all.
Oh, so you're a proper engineer.
I don't do Scrum, I don't do Agile, I do Lean. And when Agile started all those years ago, I saw it starting, thought they went to Lean and they said, right, what can we do with software? And it's diverged. And now it's its own thing. And you're saying things which I'm saying, well, we've already found answers for a lot of these things on the hardware side. Is it maybe time Agile, Scrum, whatever, went back to industry and looked at where Lean is now and go and do things like value stream mapping your processes and the likes? I
mean, I think, again, you've got to look at the people. Like, some people are going to, like, absolutely dive into that and love it, and some people are going to hate it. Again, I think what you've got to do is start with the people that you have and then work out what works for you. Like, for example, we don't really follow Scrum and we don't really follow Kanban, but we just deliver software. So, like this idea that Scrum solves problems or Kanban solves problems or XP solves problems, yeah, they do for some people, but sometimes they don't. The easiest way I found of solving people, which was never following processes, is like, hey, the amount of times people are like, I should set up a meeting with this person who they sit beside. It's like, no, you just have a conversation. Just sit beside each other and talk and solve the issue and move on.
The first Lean principle is lead with respect.
Lean with respect?
Lead with respect.
Yeah. Which is why I don't make any decisions. I delegate them all down to everyone and say, you make these decisions because I wouldn't trust me.
And I'm going to say Lean, Agile, system thinking, all of these approaches, I mean, every approach here, it comes from however long ago. You can go for Kotta, change management, all of the methodologies, all the frameworks, most of them fundamentally tied together. And you've mentioned this throughout, but I think the consistency aspect, fundamentally, it doesn't matter which tool you choose, as long as you actually have the habit to apply the methodology that you work on. So really, it's not about a particular method. It's not about Kanban, it's not about Scrum. It's literally about getting a team to work together. And now I'm going to say the fundamental issue that most people have, in my opinion, is a lot of us come from, or many people work in large enterprises, 2,000, 5,000 plus IT organization. And you do want to have a consistency of working practice. So allowing each individual team, squad, whatever, to work in their own method, it starts to change the pattern, which actually does fundamentally, and that is probably the biggest issue. How do you find the method to tie it all together? And I agree with you.
I think it's
Cargo,
almost impossible to do with big organisations. I don't know any big organisation that has managed it successfully. If there is, please let me know. I don't know them. I mean, one of the talks I was listening to said an Agile team picks its own budget. Now, I don't care what size, but yeah, he's like, well, an Agile team will define the budget. They'll pick what software they write, what licenses they write, how they spend the money, how they allocate the money, the clouds they use, what training resources they do, all of that. I don't know one organisation that doesn't have a finance person saying no, because that's just insane to me, but that's what this person described Agile as.
Go on, you set me up for it, so I'm going to lay up FinOps and the FinOps Foundation, and there was a Scotland FinOps meetup group, but the entire combination of FinOps and DevOps, or finance meets DevOps. It's not about control, it's about bringing people together. And again, cloud paradigm, you have code spending money.
Yeah.
You need to actually think about how to integrate people inside the circle together instead of it being a request cycle, because it's not anymore.
Yeah.
So it changes it back. But I think Agile and DevOps and the flow is about the only way forward with cloud. The question is how you do it at scale, as always.
Yeah.
So we've probably got time for one more question. Okay, yeah.
Just a quick point from Jeff. Lean was incorporated into the 2020 Scrum Guide, he says.
I haven't read it, I'll be honest. I read the original version of Scrum, thought it was amazing, and then humans got in the way. But no, thank you for listening to me rant about Agile. I actually really like Agile. I think it is the only way to write software. If you're not going to the moon, I just think we're getting in each other's way constantly with processes that lead nowhere. So thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Stuart. Great to see so much debate and so many questions, and I'm sure the conversations will continue afterwards. So we're going to take a 10-minute break just to give everyone a chance to get a refreshment, and then we'll come back and we'll let you know when for the next talk with Jeff. Thanks. Cool. So just want to introduce our next speaker tonight. So we've got Jeff Johnson, who's going to talk to us about Strangler figs and minimum viable replacements.
This was a talk I gave at Lean Agile Scotland a couple of weeks ago, so apologies if you're going to have to sit through it again. Should be better this time anyway. What I want to talk about is when we're replacing systems rather than building stuff from scratch, which, you know, let's face it, that's what most of us spend most of our time doing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges, something about Strangler figs, which I guess some of you are familiar with. Bit of psychology, maybe a bit of pop psychology, who knows. Some examples, approaches, some sort of coping strategies over on this side, things that I've learnt and got the scars from over the past few years. So where should we start? The back of my house, really. This is, anybody recognise where that might be? Anybody? Okay, so that's the River Tay. This is the view from the top of Kinnoull Hill. And what we've got here is a lovely bit of greenfield development. It's a nice defined plot, and we've got a road, and we've got the gas and the water and electric all going in. We've got some lovely development going on there. Really nice, nice level ground, perfect. In my own life as an ecologist, I might sort of wince a little bit, but as a sort of developer or part of the development team, that's the sort of thing dreams are made of, isn't it? You can decide what you want to do and work through. And that works for lots of people, you know, huge success stories where you've not got a lot of legacy code and issues and challenges, you know. So obviously the big boys here, and then perhaps a little bit closer to home, the great stuff they're doing in social security up there. Obviously they've got some legacy from DWP, but they're having to work through, but they're largely building stuff up from scratch. Laz isn't here tonight, but you know, our friends at Quarter Mile, and of course the challenger banks, you know, Monzo, Starling, whatever. You know, compare the success of this kind of company against the challenges that RBS faced a few years ago when they tried to just split apart, you know, the NatWest and the RBS infrastructure. And too difficult, can't do it, got to move on. So, you know, this is utopia, heaven. This is where we all want to be, and this is where we usually find ourselves, unfortunately. Some of you might recognize this. For those of you that don't, this is sort of view looking down Leith Walk. And what I'm trying to show here is we've just got a whole homologation, a whole bunch, a whole mix of services kicking in. So, you know, we've got the road for the cars, we've got the buses, we've got the utilities, you know, we've got gas, water, electricity all going down the road. And then we're trying to put on a new service on top with the trams. It's a bit of a mess. I think it's slowly getting better, but you know, this is the kind of situation we often find ourselves in. We're building services upon services. What does that mean for things that are already there? How do we replace some of the elements going forward? It's just a real mess, really. And I know there's at least one person in this room who has been suffering at the hands of this quite recently. And I think for people of Edinburgh, it'll be great when we get rid of this, I think. Okay, in reality, it sort of looks like this sort of thing, I suppose, where you've got an old sort of .NET application here, which doesn't look too bad, you know. It's there's obviously some accessibility issues. It's probably built on some sort of bespoke stack behind it. And then over on the right-hand side, we've got the sort of GDS, the Digital First design system, which looks the same whether you're, you know, applying to develop an Airbnb or taxing your car. You know, it's comfortable, it's safe, it's understood. So moving from that to this. And of course, we're all doing the swan. That's the swan on top, but what's actually going on, you know, under the surface? So, Martin Fowler's Strangler fig pattern, which I guess some of you, anybody familiar with this? This is a pattern model, okay. So it's quite simple really, from an engineering perspective anyway. You've got this monolith, this monolithic existing system, think big mainframes or even, some of the later big .NET monolithic applications. And they're doing lots of things, there's lots of parts to them, and actually replacing them, what you've got to do is identify those parts and replace them with new microservices, new services, until ultimately you've ended up with a set of new services, and the monolith is now free to die. You don't need it anymore, you can switch it off. I guess one thing to be clear about this is, this pattern also suggests that when you build this, you should build this with the idea that you're going to have to get rid of this at some point as well. So you're almost building in that ability to strangle it again at the next iteration, the next development opportunity. So from an engineering perspective, that's great. Microservices, they can do this. Get rid of the monolith, move on, fantastic. Piece of cake, let's start coding. And then, of course, we've got people in the mix. People problems, isn't it? It's always bloody people problems. And particularly, we've got expectations and behaviors within the team, within the stakeholders, within the customers, within those pesky users. They're expecting things, they're trying to do things, they feel things. And if we're going to do any kind of replacement effectively, we've got to take account of that early and often. Anybody recognize this one? So I've sort of appropriated this, and I think it sort of works. So this is Gartner's hype cycle. They probably charge us lots for using this, but I've not told them, so if you don't, we'll be all right. But basically what this says is that any new technology, and I guess cryptocurrency is the classic example, or blockchain, you start off with this idea, fantastic, it's going to change the world, it's going to be brilliant. Actually, it's not that great, it's a bit rubbish, it's not doing what we need. Oh, well, hang on, no, we can use it for some things, it might be all right. And you get to this sort of plateau of productivity where this stuff is useful. So you can think of any technology, any process, any ways of doing things, and you can pretty much guarantee that over time it can follow this kind of pattern of the perception of its usefulness and its adoption and that kind of thing. Now, to put this into context, in terms of system replacement, you're probably doing a bit of discovery, maybe a bit of alpha up here, you're actually learning, you're trying things, a bit of experimentation, you're engaging with the stakeholders, it's going to be fantastic, you're not going to have to do those ridiculous back-end systems, it's going to make you 10 times productive, it's going to save your, reduce the number of calls we're getting at the back end, it's going to be fantastic. And then, maybe here we're into beta, there's questions about budget, there's practicalities about what we're trying to do, businesses have moved on, and people start to think, I'm losing control here. It's not going to give me what I want. It's not going to give me what I've had. Start to panic, start to fear things, and they start to trying to hold on to things. And it's this sort of, this free fall within our stakeholders, within our users, within our back office users in particular, that we've got to be aware of, and we have to deal with. And there's a couple of things that we can put this down to, if you like. So, the endowment effect is one of them. So this is the idea that if you own something, you place greater value on it than if you don't own it. It's as simple as that, okay? It's mine, I've got affection, I love it, it's better than anybody else's. That's what I feel. That's really powerful, really important, and people feel this about the systems that they're operating in the back office. I guess a variation on this is a bit of prospect theory here. So this is the idea that we feel losses much more than we feel the value of gains. Okay? So if I give you £1,000, you'll think, yeah, that's all right. But But if I took £1,000 off you, you'd feel disproportionately more angry and wanting to address that loss more significantly than if I'd given you £1,000. Is it irrational? Maybe, I don't know, but it's very real, especially when you're trying to take somebody's reporting process off them that they've been using for the last 5 years. So this is Kahneman Tversky. So Kahneman, of course, is famous for, anybody know the most famous book that he wrote? Thinking Fast and Slow, exactly. A huge book, but worth a read, I think. Yeah. Okay. So we're in this space. Prospect theory, endowment, effect. It's mine, I don't want to lose it. You're going to take it away and it's not going to be as good. Okay. Some examples or some ideas where this can happen. So this was an application scheme that I worked on a few years ago, and it was just meaningless reporting. We want to be able to report on X, Y, and Z because we had a parliamentary question about it 4 years ago. But GDPR says you can't collect that information because you don't need to have your business process. Look at you blankly. But what if we want to report on that again for another MP's question? A whole heap of developing bespoke reports, dashboards, just in case. People feel comfortable around these kind of reports to prove their existence and their relationship with the systems that they're using. A registration scheme and reducing variability. So, does anybody know how many local authorities there are in Scotland? 32. Okay. How many ways do you think there are of paying your council tax?
3 billion.
Yeah, exactly. So this was a scheme that we were building to be used by local authorities. Okay, and out of those, there are 32 local authorities and 2 national parks, which are sort of pseudo local authorities. And I think it's fair to say there are at least 25 or so different ways of the final stage in this about issuing the license, issuing the registration at the end of it. And we had a user group. And we used to have these conversations every 2 weeks. We would show them progress. We'd have a backlog, probably too long, the backlog of these things. And there were always sections about variability. We've got an Oracle back-end system that we need to integrate with. We've got a more of a manual system there that we've got to integrate with. But the purpose of this was around efficiencies, streamlining, standardizing the process. So, trying to remove that variability or getting rid of that variability was the only way we were going to get to some of those efficiencies. And I'm sure you've all seen it. There's all different ways that people want to do things. Continuing the lean theme, I think, from today is around reducing the manual handling. So, not quite computer says yes or no, but if you're asking for the relevant information, and it's being provided, and it satisfies the conditions, you can say sort of yes or no. But the special case is up here that we want to consider. Okay, this is people's lives. This is where people are working every day. Possibly some really complicated systems, possibly some really difficult systems. But if you can reduce this sort of manual handling in this space, can make your life a lot easier in terms of the new system that you're going to provide. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second there, and I'll put this picture up just while I do that. So, I was having the conversation again with somebody today about how possibly one of the least favorite terms in my life is the minimum viable product. People use it, they just hose it around like everybody knows what it is and it's going to be great and it's going to be this bloody skateboard to the car or whatever it's going to be. But it's a problem for us, okay, because it means different things to different people, even if you're building something from scratch. If you're actually replacing something, it becomes even less relevant because you've already got something there. So, you know, whatever you're going to replace has actually got to replace some or all of that functionality. So it's a real problem, and it just makes me want to cry a lot of the time. So let's talk about the first releases. Let's talk about the next versions. Let's try and do away with that bloody MVP. I think it'll help us. So perhaps a little more eloquently, you don't need to experiment to understand your customers' needs. They're all right there in front of you, so learn. So, you know, can we go from build, measure, learn to actually learning? Can we take those logs from the customer service center where we've got the phone calls? You know, can we take the queries that come in the website, the chat logs, and can we actually just learn so that we can build on what we've already got rather than trying to build something that's minimum again before we start? Okay. So now we'll just talk a little bit about the kind of approaches you can take, or some of the approaches I've taken recently about replacing systems. So I think the first one, a registration service. So what we've got here is we've got a whole bunch of blocks here. So the blue blocks are the existing system, and the green blocks are sort of the replacement elements, if you like. So starting off with a legacy system, the first one we did was replace the search element. So an existing database, we knew from the user research people were really struggling to find information on properties in this example. Okay, addressing in Edinburgh is a nightmare. If any of you are involved with anything to do with addressing, you know, how do you describe a flat? You know, it's just a nightmare, and that's beyond you get towards Dundee and Glasgow. You know, have different naming conventions. So the whole search thing was a pain in the neck. Add in the mix the improvement service, UPRNs, and just a whole horlicks of problems that had to be addressed. So we started there. Great, top banana. Then let's move on to the next bit. So new applications. Okay, so there isn't anybody on the system, a new registration, come in, there you go, building a nice new shiny interface for you. All the user interface at the back end was done using the existing system until we build the next staff UI plugged in. So I can do the approvals, checks, all that kind of stuff. And then, well, we need a renewal capability. License lasts 3 years, but we're going to need renewals at some point, and there are people on the system that we need to move, that we need to be able to renew probably sooner than that, so let's build a renewal section. And then finally, let's build a reporting section. So we've actually just taken the process bit by bit and addressed that for the whole of the users. And for the sharp-eyed amongst you, we actually removed some of the bits as well. So the alternatives that I showed in one of the previous slides, you know, the 32 local authorities, the 25 different ways of doing it, coming to a standard, removing that as we went as well. What did we learn? Search was fine initially, but then it was a challenge as we built the new application. We're looking at two data sources, pain in the neck. Renewals model logic was better than reality. So you had this idea that you could just touch an application, it would draw the application through into the new system, and it was great. Really clever people thought about this, but just the clunkiness and some of the reality of that data transfer was difficult. And what we should have done is just exported the data initially, one big slot. And probably the most important bit is we didn't prepare the caseworkers enough for the loss of variability. So this was the ownership of those processes, the ownership of those paper forms, the way they were doing things, and there was real discontent in this. It didn't matter how good the UI was or how speedy the applications were, how quick they were coming through. They were really disconcerted around the bit that they had ownership of that they perceived that they'd lost. Okay, another application service. And here, instead of doing it by process, we did it by audience or user segmentation. So our existing stack and release 1 was the simplest application type to deliver core functionality. So this is quite a tricky one. It's the existing service was actually re-traumatizing people every time they were using it. It was quite difficult, and we had the classic sort of .NET system that was really difficult to use, inaccessible, duplication of screens, information that was asked for that wasn't needed, really horrible, and a vulnerable set of users.
Was it fat client or thin client?
Thin client, both thin client. And so what we said, well, we need to learn how to do this. We need to learn how to use the GDS patterns. So we'll take one of the smallest user groups, we'll trim out some of the questions that we asked them, and I think it accounted for something like 3% of the user group. And we did the UI and the user research and the testing, and we got that released. I think it took us about 9 months to get to there, which we thought was fantastic. We've learned a lot, we've got this out of the way. Brilliant, really good job. Getting really good sort of user satisfaction scores, transaction costs, uptake, all that good stuff. And then we built out, so things like file upload, things that required more verification, other documentation to be provided, additional services, handoffs to other areas, and just built it out as you would do, but on an audience or user by user base rather than process. And what did we learn here? Okay, well, the first one, the applicants loved it. We reduced the journey for this bit here, 45 to 15 minutes. Fantastic, done a really good job, patting ourselves on the back. That 3% of the users, it was superb. And for the rest, it took us another sort of year and a half to get to a useful, better service that wasn't re-traumatizing them to get to that. So this one really hurts me a little bit, really, because we could have done so much more, so much quicker with a bigger slice by just taking standard GDS patterns, using what we knew about accessibility, rather than getting into a death spiral of user research and interaction design, trying to get to that perfect solution. And so we ended up being great for 3%, but then being really shit for about a year longer than we needed to for the rest of the service. And I think sometimes we've got to remember it's about the value to the users rather than how perfect your UX design process is. And we got it wrong with this. I don't like that. Anyway, I've moved on. I'm better now. And this is another way of looking at it. And this is as it comes back to the title, a minimum viable replacement. So this isn't Spotify. It's another big organization, bigger than Spotify. And what we've got here is we've got like a pick and mix of code components, ways of doing things. So as a new developer joining this organization, there's all this candy store of stuff I can pick and mix, and I can set up a EKS cluster, and I can do my code scanning, and I can build a React front end, drag and drop, all this stuff. Sort of pick and mix of approved ways of doing things within an organization, okay? Which is great. But you're pretty much allowing the devs, the users, to sort of know what they're trying to achieve and know which bits to do. So with this one, what we're actually doing is developing a set of tutorials, the golden path flows, as we're calling them, where, if you want to deploy a React application, we'll take you through getting all the permissions, firing off to ServiceNow, getting your ADO tokens, getting your secrets, and allowing to move through that and deploy your application at the end of it. It's just a tutorial, really. So we started off with a very simple sort of vanilla one-page app, and then we're moving out to add additional apps, different backends, different levels of complexity, sort of internal facing, moving to public facing. And I guess what we're doing here is, rather than actually replacing this, we're providing an alternative way of accessing those resources. Okay, so it's about the end game, I think, is better because we've got an opinionated view and we've got a complete process that people are following, and we're hoping that that's going to provide more value to them as the developers coming in, rather than just a sort of pick and mix of candy store kind of approach. Okay. Bit of few coping strategies then, and none of this is difficult. We've got to remind ourselves though, comprehensive service design. You can have the best system in the world, but the stuff around it matters. Be clear about why you're doing it, and keep reminding yourself why you're doing it. Keep the most challenging stakeholders close. You want them in the tent, not outside the tent. And no surprises. Yeah, get the service design right. I think we're doing some great stuff in Scotland around this. But there's also some pretty horrific examples locally. I don't know if anybody's tried to use the young person's bus travel cards. You feel my pain. I mean, horrific, absolutely horrific from a service in Scotland, given all the other stuff that's been going on. So let's learn from those lessons, Be clear about the benefits. It's about value streams. Everything comes down to a value stream, whether it's, whether you've got a burning platform or legislative change or business change. It's all about value streams. Be clear about why you're doing things, why you're taking those things from those caseworkers that are trying to hold on to them. What is the reason? Keep telling them what the reason is and what it's going to do for them. Okay? Get them to work with you, design together. And I know, again, I don't think there are many designers in the room here, but co-design is difficult. You definitely don't want your users designing your service, but you have to have them involved in the process, and you have to make sure that you're engaged and that they feel like they're providing value, because they will be providing value. Tell them what you're going to do. Tell them as you're doing it, and tell them why you've done it all the time. The comms, the business readiness, the big picture stuff, you've got to do that. You've absolutely got to keep making sure that the communications, the messaging is right as you're going out. And as product managers, stakeholder management, that's product management 101. Keep telling them what you're doing it and why you're doing it. And if you can do all that, you can rescue them from the death fall, bring them back up the sort of slope of enlightenment, and we'll get to here. And we are here with some of these services, So landlord registration, I think, is a success in this space now. Other services are a success in this space now. But it's not a simple up there and across. You've got that drop-off to worry about. So, if you can deal with some of that, if you can use some of the sort of coping strategies, just aware of what's important to people, then you will be successful eventually, and you might end up with something like that. And that's it. Hello.
In the second example you gave of the way that you replace the system, I think it was where you built the, so you had a release one with I'm trying not to say minimum viable product here. How much, by the time you got to release 3, how much waste did you found in the system? Like, I take it you didn't replace, did you have to replace all the functionality, or did you find that actually quite a lot of the functionality that was in the monolith never made it back into the third release?
Yeah, there was a lot of it that never made it back because we reduced the questions that we were asking, we reduced the evidence, and it's that wider service piece. So we were actually narrowing down what was actually required to get to decision rather than just replicate what was already there.
Just a follow-up, if you don't mind. So for that purpose, did you find that approach better than the previous approach where you replaced it in a more modular way? Was there more waste found in this approach or the more modular replacements?
That's a really interesting question. I'd have to do some thinking about it to actually give you a useful answer. I think this diagram doesn't work terribly well because these sections are probably smaller than the parent ones originally. But at the same time, you've also explicitly removing sections there, which we were probably removing bits of sections here as we're going through. So yeah, it's hard to know. I'd have to look at it.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
I think my question is that when you talk about these different things, is it considering replacing or improving the system?
Improvement. It's got to be improvement. There's an element of replacement, but you're always trying to improve things as you're doing it. And there can be different business drivers. Whether it's a burning platform or, like I say, legislative change, or even accessibility regulations coming in, which was a big driver for lots of us. So improvements primarily, but there'll also be replacement of tech stacks with cloud stacks, etc. So yeah, absolutely, mixed bag.
Okay.
In terms of technologies, so the existing was probably ASP.NET version 2 or something like that. What was what did it all end up with in the browser?
Well, for these two, sort of GDS open source stacks, so Postgres databases and various sort of Java and JavaScript front ends. It was a mix, but all pretty much open source, I'd say. It's okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
To Jeff and Stuart this evening. It's been really interesting talks and we've had some great questions and debate as well from people. Also big thanks to the People's Postcode Lottery for hosting us tonight and providing refreshments, and thank you to Anna and Finlay for all the organisation, and also thank you to Alan from Product Forge for live streaming tonight, and to everybody here for coming along. Hopefully we'll see you at our November meetup. It's yet to be decided what it will be about, but if you keep your eye out on Meetup. And if you've got any feedback at all about tonight, feel free to share with myself or Duncan or Stephen, or you can fill in the Meetup sort of feedback form that you'll get sent out. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.